Mm-hmm.
after doing the level 2, it was like coming to a bit of a crossroads, and it was kind of a choice of going UEFA B or down the youth route.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I work mostly with kids,
Yeah.
so let's go down the youth award
Mm-hmm.
route. And stuck with that. And I still haven't actually done the football UEFA B.
All right.
I've gone all around it. I've got 2 different level 3s. I've gone and done a masters, but I've still not done the football UEFA B because I'm not entirely sure how relevant it is to my learning now.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to go and become an academy coach, it would obviously be incredibly relevant as a qualification.
Yeah.
But I'm not particularly worried about doing that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've left it for now. I may
Yeah.
pick it up in the future, but that's not been a priority to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as well as you say as well that it all depends who's delivering the course as well, because I suppose in one way UEFA would dictate what has to be covered in a course, but I find whoever's delivering the course, the individual, can either make it great or just make it pretty average. I was quite fortunate when I was going through mine. I had some great coach educators that I'm still in contact with today. And I think a big thing that you touched on as well is the participants that's on the course. I mean, the opportunity to network and just learn, just even sitting down at the lunch table and the dinner table, because they're hard going, the courses. They're generally 9 to 9 each day when you're doing the week long course. And I remember one day I sat down at lunch and I had to pinch myself because facing me was Craig Brown, who at that stage was the Scotland national team manager,
Mm.
Graham Taylor, who was the former England manager that did great things at Watford. Aston Villa was sitting there, and then one of my own mentors, Paul Kirk, here. And you just think to yourself, this is absolutely amazing. 2 national team managers, top local coach here, and Jake Gallagher, that was the one that was delivering my course, that worked for many years with UEFA. But I mean, the stuff that you can just actually learn away from the course itself, just through discussion over a lunch or dinner table, brilliant.
I had a curiosity about futsal
Mm-hmm.
that stemmed from Juninho
Yeah.
when he came to Middlesbrough. Um, and I remember reading these various articles about that he grew up playing futsal, and um, him trying to set up these little mini futsal academies as well in the area up in Middlesbrough. And
Mm-hmm.
then there was hardly any other way to find any information about it. So I
Mm.
just relied on bits from Shoot magazine and Match and so on.
Yeah.
Then years later, obviously, the internet became a much more efficient and effective thing, and I
Mm-hmm.
was able to find out a bit more. Um, and I noticed that there was a course available, an introduction to futsal, not that far away from me that I was thinking about. And again, someone who I was on a coaching course was thinking about going, and we both decided to go on the course. And when we got there, we were told they've just changed the introduction to futsal into level 1. So
Mm-hmm.
congratulations, you've now got the futsal level 1.
Fantastic.
Right, okay. The next thing was talking to the same person, um, looking at level 2, and it was at St George's Park. And the conversation was, have you ever been to St George's Park? No, I haven't. Have you? No. Shall we go?
Mm-hmm.
So we went to St George's Park to do the course, kind of as a treat to see what it was like there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, satisfy a bit more of that curiosity. But at this stage, I'd started to adapt some of my indoor football sessions into futsal,
Yeah.
just purely because the footballs were bouncing up around the kids' heads, and it became a real scrap
Mm-hmm.
at times. So, right, I'm just going to get a futsal ball,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a much better session indoors with the futsal ball, but its lack of bounce helping to actually play rather than fight.
Yeah.
So yes, suddenly level 2 qualified. Great. I then got an email from the FA saying, we are launching our pilot UEFA B. Are you interested?
Mm-hmm.
And by then, I was working with someone else who had been very involved in futsal, and I said to them, do you think it's worth doing it? And they said, yes, they're going to do the course as well. So we ended up traveling up and down to St. George's Park once a month for 8 months with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, before I realized it, I was on that UEFA B path, had the qualification, became one of the first coaches in England to get the qualification, that I was allowed on it with no team. I didn't have a team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons I was invited was because at the time, the criteria were you had to have a youth award.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who were invited on and didn't have their youth award, but they were coaching teams. Mm-hmm. Whereas I was the other way around. I had all of the pre-qualifications. I just didn't have a team. Mm-hmm. So while I was on the course, that's when I got offered my first bit of work with Brentford FC Community Trust, because they needed a futsal coach.
And now the direction I want to turn the podcast in now is just based around the books that you've published in. So your first book came out in 2018 based on 3v3.
Yes, indeed it did.
So talk us, what gave you the enthusiasm and to bring out a book number one, and what brought you to bring it out based on that title and topic?
We were including small-sided games within a portion of our syllabus at Brentford. Mm-hmm. Which is not to say small-sided games are not used elsewhere, but we dedicated a chunk of it to 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, 4v4. Mm-hmm. 1v1's fine. No issues with going ahead on 1v1. I found 2v2 to be slightly unsatisfying. Mm-hmm. Not that it doesn't have merit, of course it does, but I found it had limits, really severe limits, because the shapes and movements that you can make are limited by the number of players that you have. In essence, you can only create something that is linear. Because you're two connecting points. That's all you have.
Yeah.
Going into 3v3, you could do much more. Mm-hmm. Because you can create your triangles, which I think are essential for both attacking and defending.
Yeah. And
then it opens up more movements, overlaps, third man runs, up, back and throughs and so forth. Your fundamentals of football gameplay. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time, I hadn't made the resources. I was looking for resources.
Yeah.
And all there was Horst Vane, really. Mm-hmm. And now, Horst Vane's stuff is fantastic. But I felt like it could be taken a step further. Mm-hmm. So I felt that you could look more at these key movements and moments slightly more expressly. Mm-hmm. And that's what I set out to do. And I think I designed 20 something practices, maybe some closer to 30.
Yeah.
And I just shared them on social media. Mm-hmm. And they were eaten up.
Yeah.
And people said to me, "Oh, you could like make an ebook or something here." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And then over time, I developed a few more resources and wrote a few more blogs on the subjects. And I'm starting to look at it and going, I think I've got enough stuff here now that I can make a real book out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
At which point I contacted a publisher, went through all the coaching books on my shelf and had a look at which publisher had given a go to people who didn't have a national reputation, mm-hmm. somewhat unknown, and ended up contacting Benny and Kearney,
Mhm.
pitched the idea to them, and they said yes.
Fantastic, fantastic. And that first book then, when you published in 2018, what was the initial feedback? And where did it sell? How many countries and stuff?
Um, I know. So we had a version printed in German,
Mm-hmm.
which is really interesting because now Germany have made a big bold move towards 3v3 in their youth age groups and their under 8, 9 age groups.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting to me. But generally, I think the sales have been in English speaking countries: USA, Canada, Australia.
I was going to say USA. I'm sure is huge because when I've coached over there a couple of times, the 3v3 concept and tournament day play is huge in the American market.
Yeah, so there have been quite a few sales. I'd still say the majority of sales have been UK and Ireland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For definite. I've got breakdowns of all that stuff somewhere. But yeah, I think book one on my last report has gone over 2,000 copies sold now.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then that give you then obviously the strength in going like, you know what, there's a demand here for this topic and for many people that we're starting to follow and gain respect. And your second book came out a year later then.
Yeah, and that what happened with that one was I got some feedback going, this is great, this is really comprehensive, and I just thought, nah, there's loads of stuff I didn't put in.
Mm-hmm.
I've still got loads that I haven't actually didn't put in book one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, okay. Is there enough here to, if I make a few more things and that drag in some other bits that are related?
Yeah.
Is there enough for a second book? And there was. The only problem with it was myself and the publisher, we probably weren't explicit enough that it's different content.
Yeah.
Rather than a volume 2.
Yeah.
Or a second edition,
mm-hmm.
so to speak. So that probably impacted the sales there. So I think that's somewhere close to 800 sales. So nowhere near as many as book number one.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your follow-up book then from that was based on the principles of play in 2021.
Yep, that's now I think 6 months old as we speak here in October.
Mm-hmm.
And that one stemmed from a conversation on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, a strength and conditioning coach decided to ask me the question, were there any fundamentals for football that he needed to know about? So I started responding with, well, if a fullback, the modern fullback, has to have excellent stamina because of the amount of work rate they put in. Defenders and strikers may need excellent upper body strength and so on and so forth. And he replied and went, no, I don't mean in those terms. I mean actually playing the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess you mean the principles of play.
Yeah.
So I described the traditional principles that we've been taught on coaching courses for about 50 years, I reckon. Plus the 2 transition principles that have been recently added. And he said, that's fantastic. Could you recommend a book? And I had to stop and think and go, no, I actually can't, because every book around was about the principles or the individual principles of superstar coaches. So there's a ton of books about the principles of Pep Guardiola, the principles of Jose Mourinho, the principles of Jurgen Klopp, and the last 2 or 3 years, the principles of Marcelo Bielsa.
Yeah.
But I couldn't think of a book that was just about what would be considered the universal principles of play.
Mm-hmm.
and I thought this is actually needed,
Mm.
especially as going back to my own experience of going on Youth Mod 3 and them asking about the principles of play. And I actually sat there and went, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did know. I knew them by some slightly different terminology from level 2.
Mm-hmm.
But in England, coaches who are going on courses will not really get any real contact with the principles of play until level 2, but real detail on level 3.
Yeah.
And I just think if you're going to teach the game or even design games that will help to teach the game, you need to know what the principles of play are, because otherwise you don't know what you're teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I then had in mind this needs to be a little handbook, like something very, very short. I was looking at 40 to 50 pages, like pick up and put down.
Yeah.
That didn't work for the publisher, so we ended up something like, I think it's 120 or something like that pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's how the third book came about. I think there was a gap and a need for it. And I think even for the casual fan or the not so casual fan who thinks they understand what they're watching,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they don't necessarily.
Yeah.
And not to demean their knowledge, but if they want to have a bit of a deeper understanding, my book hopefully would help them.
Excellent. And if anybody listening here would like to get their hands on a copy of any of your books, what's the easiest way for them to go about that?
The easiest way nowadays is just Amazon. Just go onto Amazon, type my name in, and up they all come. That is now the easiest thing. Or I think you could probably even just type me into Google now, and it will come up. But Amazon is going to be the easiest way to go straight to the books.
Excellent. Congratulations. It was been great success, all 3 books. And did I read right? Is there a 4th one in the pipeline?
There's at least a 4th one in the pipeline.